Hello, AJ Gibson here, host of the Morning Beat on Channel Q Radio. And first and foremost, we want to say thank you for being here for this dynamic panel discussion. We've partnered up with our friends over at Christopher Street West LA Pride, as well as the Stonewall Inn Gives Back initiative to put together a blockbuster panel of some of the most incredible thought leaders in the industry. Today, we're talking about LGBTQ plus inclusion and diversity. And before I introduce you to our panel, I've got a couple of fantastic women I'd like you to know. First up, I'd like to introduce you to Sharon Franklin Brown. She is the board president of Christopher Street West Association, LA Pride.
I just want to say welcome, everyone, and I am just so glad to have you here and your willingness to do this. It's amazing to see such great leaders who have common goals and wanting to move diversity, equity, and inclusion forward. And specifically, when we're looking at the current environment and including, the LGBTQ experiences as well as the intersectionality of Black experiences, inclusion in that. And I just want to say, and my hat's off to you, and I admire what everyone is doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Now I'd like to toss it over to Stacey Lentz. She is the CEO of the Stonewall Inn Gives Back initiative. Take it away, Stacey.
My name is Stacey Lentz, and I am a co-owner of the Stonewall Inn and the CEO of the Stonewall Inn Gives Back initiative. And we're excited to be partnering with LA Pride for this important conversation. We want to thank AJ, Channel Q, and all the panelists for taking time out of the busy schedule to join us today. Now more than ever, it's super important to have a candid and open dialogue around the role corporations play in sponsoring Pride events and LGBTQ organizations across the country. With that role comes a responsibility that goes beyond just cutting checks. Don't get me wrong, we love those checks and we need them to support the critical events and work we do in our community. But we need to make sure we are aligning ourselves and forming authentic partnerships with corporations, brands, and companies that are not only working to change their own internal corporate culture to provide a safe space for LGBTQ workers, but are also working to change the broader culture at large. We've been lucky at the Stonewall Gives Back initiative to have some amazing corporate partners. For example, when we met with Brooklyn Brewery to discuss making a beer to support the work we do, it would have been easy for them to just make a one-off Pride beer sold in June. But they committed to doing a beer that is brewed 365 days out of the year in 38 states and launching in 14 countries. When we worked with FCB, a health advertising firm here in New York, it would have been easy for them to hop on the Stonewall 50 anniversary bandwagon, like a lot of corporations and companies did. But they waited a year later and started Stonewall the Next 50 to make sure that we could capitalize on that momentum. When we sat down with the New York Yankees, it would have been easy for them to do a Pride night like many other leagues and teams. But they knew that they needed to go beyond that. So they created the Stonewall Yankees Annual Scholarship, which gives $10,000 to LGBTQ students from each of one of the 5 boroughs here in New York. As LGBTQ organizations, we have an incredible opportunity to create amazing and impactful change through our corporate partnerships. But we owe it to our community to make sure we are aligning ourselves with companies and brands that are doing the work internally and externally to advance LGBTQ equality. Today, we're talking to some talented senior thought leaders from organizations about how they are doing just that. Now I'll turn it back to you, AJ. Thank you.
Stacey, you're wonderful. I adore you. Thank you for that. We're super excited to have this conversation today that impacts our community from some of the thought leaders and different organizations and corporations across the country. Kicking things off, we have Sharon Franklin Brown. She's the president of the board of directors of Christopher Street West Association, LA Pride. We're joined by Stacey Lentz, the chief executive officer of the Stonewall Inn Gives Back initiative. We have Raven Jemison, executive vice president, business initiative for the Milwaukee Bucks. We have Susan McManus. She's the vice president, business solutions marketing of Nationwide. We're also joined by Jen Palmer, the director office of the CMO for T-Mobile. We're also joined by Abby Fiorella, the chief technology risk officer for MasterCard. Isema D. Gibbs is the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Vice President of Programs for JetBlue Foundation, JetBlue Airways. We're also joined today by Jarvis Sam, the Vice President, Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Nike, Inc. Joining us today also Connor Feeney, Marketing Lead, Unilever International North America, company Unilever. And my boss, Jeff Fetterman, the Regional President of Entercom Southern California for Entercom and Radio.com. I know personally myself and my fiance, we've been together 8.5 years. So we've seen quite a transition with corporations, some of them finally getting on board. And I will say for us and for many of our friends in the LGBTQ plus community, we're very leery of companies that celebrate Pride in June, and then we never hear a peep from them again. We see some special packaging, maybe their social media turns into a rainbow for a month, and that's it. And it's frustrating. It's, on one hand, it's nice to see the acknowledgement for a bit, but just in the last few years, we've seen a lot of corporations really get on board and start to really be allies year round. I know Nike has been doing this for years, whether it's a Black History Month or equality and pride in June and throughout the year. My partner, my friends and I, we purchase through Nike because we see their commitment to our community year round. So it does matter. It's super important, which is why we're here today, to commend you all for doing such a fantastic job and to think of ways that we can all help each other do better moving forward. Having said that, let's look back to the year that was 2020, if we must. It was a wild year. It was a difficult year, but it was also an opportunity to do things a little bit differently, which is always a good thing if there is a silver lining on the year that was 2020. So I want to know, and I'm going to ask this question to everyone, and I'll call you one at a time. But what are your key LGBTQ plus goals based on what you learned in 2020, heading into 2021 and beyond? Speaking of Nike, I'm going to start with Jarvis Sam from Nike. How about you answer that question first, please?
Thank you so much. So it's been a really exciting time for us as we, we're just recently recognized for our 19th year as being part of the Corporate Equality Index with HRC. And then this year, this June, will actually also mark the 10th anniversary of our Be True product. So as many on the call probably know, Nike has done a series of footwear, apparel, and equipment products, not only to celebrate, but pay homage to the various endeavors connected to our community for years. And so in this 10th anniversary, it's really a focus on how does this connection between both purpose, product, and our brand campaigning and key brand defining moments really come to life? A couple of things that the pandemic has continued to teach us is one, about the significance of connection and connectivity, and the sharp focus on the necessity of mindfulness. We know that for a lot of communities that have been impacted by a construct where it's unclear if you're living at work or working from home, we're all trying to understand how do we leverage focuses on mindfulness to impact community experiences. Paired with that, with key endeavors post the murder of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020, we are forced to think about intersectionality in a whole new way. And what that means is our community thinking more about the significance of Black trans lives, Black non-binary lives, and continuing to tell the stories in a very positive way of what it means to be Black and LGBTQ+. So you'll start to see that is going to be a big focus for us over the next couple of months and years, is how do we think through the lens of intersectionality to reflect the right voices of community? It's not just an expectation of us coming from Gen Z, but it's what's required at this point.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Jarvis. I think I have at least the last 5 editions of the Be True shoes in all the cars. I love it every year. I still get the compliments on the 2 shoes that don't match, the triangles, the rainbow spectrum across the 2 shoes. I still wear those. I wore them yesterday, so they're fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's head over to Abby Fiorella from MasterCard. What are your key LGBTQ plus goals for 2021?
Okay. So our first goal for 2021 is the hope that we will all be together. This is a good start, but hold it out for in person. But we have a number of priorities. I want to talk generally, and then I want to give a couple of just recent wins that I'm really excited about. But we've been in this game for a long time, which evidence our commitment. So we have a priority on building an inclusive sort of culture and community that's not only within our respective 4 walls, but the broader communities that we serve. And that's founded really on a principle that we do well by doing good. And we oftentimes, you hear a lot about EQ and IQ. We call it internally our DQ, which is just our decency. quotient. And that really is intersectional. And so we have probably 4 areas of priority this year, which is not different from years past, but it's really on supporting our employees and their families, making sure that our hiring and recruiting practices are reflective of our values, our business resource groups to drive impact, and then lastly, sort of society and our partnerships. And I want to talk about 2 things. I said that we've been in this for, a long time, and it's who we are. Really proud that MasterCard was one of 13 original firms that formed Open for Business. And that's an informal coalition focused on supporting LGBTQ plus inclusion globally. And the coalition has since doubled in size, I'm thrilled to say, and has been sort of pivotal in reframing LGBTQ rights as an economic issue, as well as a human rights issue. And so we recently signed on to statements of support in Taiwan and Hong Kong. So we are taking this global. And the other thing that I am, super proud of and very close to my heart is that we partnered with our customer banks to create the first LGBTQ plus solution, which is where folks' legal names don't match their gender identity or presentation. So we launched a true name card, and it is gaining traction, and it allows a person's chosen name to appear on the front of their debit, credit, or prepaid card, so that there is every card for everyone. And until now, transgender, non-binary discrimination is carried through to sort of all aspects of life, including card and payment mechanisms. So this is a small but a significant step forward, and really proud to stand behind it.
Thank you so much, Abby. I will say that it's not a small step, actually. We covered this story on the Morning Beat a couple of months back when your True Name campaign came out, and you made that announcement. And the conversations we've had around it have been incredible. It means so much to so many people, whether you actually are non-binary or a member of the trans community or just an ally, as I am. It does mean a lot. So don't diminish that accomplishment.
No, listen, I think it changes people's lives in very meaningful ways. I think we have more work to do, but allowing somebody to sort of, be able to lead with how they identify and express is we all need to be there, and we can all do our part to contribute. I'm happy that we've taken that step.
Well, thank you for that. Your name really is like such a personal thing. It means so much. So it does mean a lot to so many. So thank you for that. Now I'm sweating a little bit. I'm going to head over to my boss, the guy who signs the paychecks, Jeff Fetterman from Entercom. What are your key LGBTQ plus goals for 2021 here at Channel Q and across all of our platforms?
Yeah, great. Hey, thanks. First of all, I'm honored to be on this panel. If you would ask me 3 years ago if I was going to be on a panel that was geared towards what we're doing for the community, LGBTQ community, I don't think this is where I would have thought I would be, but I cannot be happier to be here. And more importantly, more proud of the job that Channel Q has done to spread the word and the word of tolerance. And AJ, you better watch it. I'm watching you on this whole thing. Okay. So what we've done, just so everybody knows how Channel Q evolved. Channel Q was not a mandate that came down from our corporate headquarters saying we need an LGBTQ radio station. That's not how Channel Q evolved back in 2018. The way that Channel Q evolved was a group of people here at the station we put together was kind of different. And I say the cluster, we have a lot of stations here in LA and across the country, but the stations here in LA, it was a bunch of people that came together, and I threw out, hey, how do we move audio forward in today's environment? And a lot of different ideas came out, but the idea that really resonated was an LGBTQ radio station. And what was fascinating about it is that it wasn't everybody that was part of this group wasn't part of the community. They were just happened to be allies. And quite frankly, back then we were learning the word ally. We didn't know what the word ally meant. I will be one of those people who say, like, I kind of understood it, but and to see Channel Q grow from, so anyway, we developed stations, to see Channel Q grow from one station in Los Angeles to now into 36 markets across the country has been something really special. And I will say that's externally for all the people that we're helping. And we know that we help a lot of people because we give that voice outside of our walls, but even internally here, I've had, in the last 2.5 years, people that have finally felt comfortable and have come out to me in my office like, hey, I just want to let you know, thank you for Channel Q, and have come out. And like, that is about as impactful as you can get. I mean, I've been doing this for a while, and those were like moments where I just stopped and went, whoa, we're really doing a lot of good things. And so as we look forward, we're in the 36 markets. We're on the radio.com app. I think what we're going to try to do this year, even better than we've done in the past, is reach into smaller markets where there isn't as much access, where there isn't a voice and there isn't as much, I would like to say probably as much understanding, and give those people a voice and give them some coaching and feedback and let them know that where they sit today as a human being is just okay. That's like they can be who they want to be. And I think that some of that is missing, and I'm not picking on small markets. If anybody on here is from small markets, I just think we've learned that they don't have that access. And so that's one of our main goals. And then, of course, raising money. And we want to raise money year round. And when we launched Channel Q, and we talked about it at the beginning of this panel, was it's not about just being out there in the parade in June and throwing a rainbow on the truck and getting all your employees to go march that one day. We've all seen that. It's pretty artificial when you see that happening in the parades. We said we want to be there every single day. So what that's evolved into is now working with Pride, which we're so. And again, I think the reason why this is so important now is because of the pandemic. So Pride needs obviously an outlet across the country. And so year round and figure out how to do parades now, et cetera. So being involved for us year round is what we've been doing anyway. So this just kind of piggybacks onto that. It's really exciting. And again, this is a great panel. Congratulations to everybody for putting this together.
Awesome. Thank you, boss. I will say I've had a lot of bosses over the years, and he walks the walk. He has a huge heart. He adores us, probably because we're the most fun station they now have, because we are the LGBTQ plus station. Everybody loves to swing by and hang out when we're all working together. Hopefully we get to do that again soon. So thank you, Jeff, for creating the space for us. Let's move on to Connor Feedy of Unilever. Connor, do you want to unmute and tell us what your key LGBTQ plus goals are for 2021?
No, great. And thank you, AJ, for the intro. It's great to be with everyone today. I think, AJ, you said it exactly right when you spoke about companies needing to move beyond June and just being in that kind of June bucket, and then June is done and let's move on. So when I speak to what Unilever are doing, I think externally, first of all, we're very focused on driving systemic change this year outside of the city bubbles, with the full support program that will run through the year, working with a number of grassroots organizations in parts of the US that really there is much need for change and support. We then leverage our brands to drive advocacy behind those organizations through investment, both in terms of comms, to deliver the message to a broad audience in terms of what we're doing, but also then in terms of donations locally to drive that change. And we're actually still working through the key measures. It's very important that we've got key measures in terms of what that change looks like and what we're really trying to achieve overall. I think internally in Unilever itself, it's an exciting time for Unilever, uniquely positioned as it's a business that has 60% of its business today is in emerging markets. And we have an ever-growing LGBTQ network. And if you think about it, there's 73 countries in the world today that still outlaw gay sex. So Unilever is uniquely positioned to drive change through their internal workforce as well. And we do that through driving broad involvement. We have an ever-growing network that's gone from the tens to the hundreds to I think the thousands this year. We want to train and educate our employees with all the resources that are available. We also want to amplify our employees' voices so that they can tell their stories. And we want to drive involvement and empowerment around what we're doing. And, hopefully post-COVID, we'll be able to have more direct volunteering opportunities and more direct engagement face-to-face. I'm looking forward to those days. But that's really the kind of key areas that we're focused on this year.
Thank you so much, Connor. I've heard this come up a couple of times. I can speak to this, the small market. I grew up in a very small market in Northwest Ohio. We are the most conservative county in 88 counties in the state of Ohio. And if I had, corporations that my family supported, that I knew supported me, or if I had a radio station that was there for me as a kid, I might not have had the experience and the struggles that I had and that others like me are still having to this day. So I love that we're not just focusing on the big cities. I also love that what I think is so great about this panel, and I'm going to move on. I feel inspired to say this right now, is that oftentimes we look to, whether it's governments around the world or we look at politicians, or maybe we look at celebrities to try to move things forward. And there's been a lot of trust lost, with politicians and that. So I think it's so important that corporations and brands that we actually trust are getting on board and making this push globally, because I think that's how change is really going to happen. So it's just really inspiring to be a part of this today and to hear you all talk about these initiatives, and kudos to you all. So let's move on to Jen Palmer from T-Mobile. Jen?
Hi, AJ. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I'm just with some esteemed colleagues here. I'm just thrilled with all the progress that everyone has been making. At T-Mobile, I think, we typically, people realize us as showing up at Pride, is that one big June event. I will tell you, it all started really organically with our employees. We've got over 30,000 employees across the country. You think about our retail presence, we have call centers across the country. Very organically is how Pride started for us. Our employees wanted to be out in the communities. They're out and proud, and they love who they work for, and they wanted to represent the community themselves. So, that built over time. And fast forward to last year, pandemic aside, our company had signed a memorandum of understanding that aligned essentially with our integration with Sprint. We merged with Sprint in April of last year. But this memorandum of understanding was essentially us aligning with key strategic civil rights organizations to ensure that, we take a deep look at inside our own company and really what are we doing as a company with our, as far as our recruitment, retention, and, philanthropic endeavors. And we have expanded that. So now it's a 14 member board that is taking a deep look at what we're doing. And, we've also worked to expand our 5G services to those communities in need. And so we're continually assessing how do we give our products and services that keep people connected, especially during this dramatic time of need, and making sure that we're providing it to those who need it most. We've also developed, from an external perspective, a cause marketing organization, and that is just starting to pick up. And you'll see us really trying to be a brand that's more immersive in our community in an authentic way, taking all that love that our employees are just naturally showing, and basing that in an external perspective. From the internal perspective, we have over 11,000 members in our Pride ERG. This just runs deep through the veins of our employees. And, as much as they were so sad we couldn't physically be connected last year, it didn't mean that they weren't, still being active in their communities. And so we really looked for some real hyper-local opportunities to support, certain markets that were doing a lot for the LGBTQ plus community. We're also this year looking at some different leadership development programs for our talent. T-Mobile as an organization, we're super proud that we are, have over 50% in diversity, over 40%, women in roles in this technology environment. But gosh, like a lot of companies, once you start getting up into higher leadership positions, that's where you start to see that not looking quite as diverse as your broader numbers. And so we really want to be focusing on that in meaningful ways. And how do we, retain our talent and promote our talent into these other positions so we can really be a far more effective technology company. So those are just a few of the things that we're looking forward to this year. And then, of course, naturally, like I said, we're eager to all get physically back together. In 2019, we were in over 60 Pride events across the country. So it's, like I said, we go where our employees want to go, and it's really important for them. And boy, we sure do miss being with one another.
Thank you, Jen. Over 60 means you're definitely in some smaller markets. It wasn't just about the big cities.
Yes.
I've actually worked with T-Mobile multiple times over the years. I've hosted red carpets that were sponsored by T-Mobile in Las Vegas for the Billboard Music Awards and the Academy of Country Music Awards. And every single person I've ever worked with at T-Mobile has been nothing but wonderful. And it wasn't that long ago that like an openly gay man wasn't hosting these major red carpets. And so I just thank you for that, from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate what you're doing. How about Sue McManus from Nationwide? I graduated from The Ohio State University, lived in Columbus, Ohio for many years. It's where I came out. Speaking of Nationwide, Sue, what are you all doing for LGBTQ plus rights and goals, or what are your goals within the company for 2021 and beyond?
Awesome. Well, thank you, AJ, for that introduction. And I also grew up in Northwest Ohio, so we'll have to compare notes after this. I'm really excited to be here, and Nationwide's very proud of having earned a perfect score on the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index. It's 17 years for us. I know not quite as many for some of you, but we were the first insurance company and the first Ohio-based company to earn that perfect score. And thank you. And Nationwide's got a long-standing history of supporting the LGBT community in the workplace, in the marketplace, and in the communities where we work and serve. And so our 2021 goals are very much focused on expanding that. And we've had to adjust to the pandemic, both from a associate standpoint, working from home. And so a lot of our goals are focused on how do we continue to create that safe space at Nationwide in a virtual environment for all of our associates, whether they're transitioning on the job or coming out or managing stress or wanting to get involved in their local LGBT community. And so we partner with a lot of community organizations. The LGBT community needs us more than ever. And we look to place associates on boards there to volunteer, to raise money. It's a critical component of our leadership development internally. We also externally are focused to make sure our brand and reputation is ensuring our advertising products and processes are inclusive, and that portrays itself. We have a big supplier diversity program that we keep expanding to make sure that we're doing businesses that reflect the communities we work in. And so we seek LGBTQ owned businesses to be our suppliers and vendors. And so, those are just some of the things that we're focused on in 2021.
Thank you, Sue. I will say this. I graduated from The Ohio State University, about 15 or 16 years ago now. And I didn't quite understand at the time, but almost all of my gay friends, their first jobs out of college were at Nationwide in downtown Columbus.
I believe you.
They all spoke so highly of it. Now I understand why. You guys were ahead of the game. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
The same question we're going to go to Raven Jennison from the NBA. Go LeBron. I'm an Ohio guy, but I'm a Laker too. What are your key LGBTQ plus goals for 2021?
That's awesome. So full circle, my wife went to Ohio State University, The Ohio State University. I am representing the Milwaukee Bucks and quasi the NBA as well. I am going to represent those smaller markets that you guys are talking about.
Okay, Giannis.
Yep, but we don't consider ourselves a smaller market team because we do have an international superstar in Giannis, but the market itself is smaller. But I just want to say thank you guys for inviting me, because we are the infants in this journey, and it's just such an honor to be a part of this group who's been at it for so long. And I'm just looking forward to learning from you all as we continue this conversation. But our goals really start internally. There's a few, because we're young in this journey at the Milwaukee Bucks. We want to make sure that what we are doing internally reflects authentically what we're doing externally. So the first thing is representation. So as a Black queer woman, I'm at the intersection of so many diverse elements, if you will. So I definitely check a lot of boxes for the team, but representation matters. So that's the first piece that we're really focused on. And as a senior executive in the organization, I will play a prominent role to make sure that my seat at the table matters with respect to the LGBTQ plus community. And let's be honest, the sports business industry is antiquated. It's very macho. There's misogyny still reigning in so many circles, and Jen put it very eloquently in that as you go up higher, that's even more prominent, right? So it's important for me to speak up and represent what's possible for our employees to make sure they're comfortable bringing their full self to work. So that's the first piece, is representation. The second piece is education, right? We have a diversity leadership council that is trying to lead the charge with our employees to make sure that they have the tools and the content to be more proactive in learning what it means to be LGBTQ plus in America today and in the world today, and what we need from our allies. So we're making sure that we are trying to reduce the labor put on this community and making sure we can educate ourselves on how to be a better ally. Because it's one thing to say, I want to be an ally, but it's another thing to ask someone of the community to hold your hand and do the work for you, which is what we're not doing. So education is that second piece. And then allyship, making sure that we're trained appropriately to know what being an ally means. And in a market like Milwaukee, you still hear tolerance and being tolerant of the community. And we want to remove that from our lexicon. We really want to know what it means to work alongside and live alongside those in the LGBT community. So allyship and standing proudly with those of us in the community is a key focal area for the Bucks. So that's the internal conversation that we're having and the goals that we're setting for ourselves. And then externally, traditionally, when you think about community outreach and you think about what you want to do in the community, it's driven more towards traditional when we think about sports, education, economic empowerment, and health and wellness as examples. And it's usually narrow in that scope. And it's easy to say, hey, we want to put more physical fitness in schools because that's not going to ruffle any feathers, right? But we really want to take a stand and broaden our scope externally to make sure we're targeting specific issues for the community and making sure that when we have partnerships, that it's authentic. So when we talk about internal, we want to make sure that we're leveraging our reach in a way that is impactful for the LGBT community. So we're expanding our partnership with the Wisconsin LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. We're increasing our financial support to local organizations who are doing the great work in this space, because let's be honest, we are not experts, but we do have tremendous reach. So how can we leverage that reach to elevate and amplify the work of the folks that are doing the real work? So that's just a few things that we're focused on here as we're kind of crawling a little bit before we walk.
I adore everyone on this panel. Thank you, Raven, for that. I do a lot of public speaking actually in Wisconsin, randomly enough. We need to connect after this at some point. Also, last night, speaking of NBA, and I'm going to go back to LeBron for just a moment. Sorry. I mean, he said just being from, Akron, from Northeast Ohio, it's a big deal to be from Ohio and have a guy like him sort of advocating for so many good causes. And he created a show called The Wall on NBC. It's been out for a couple of seasons now. And my mom texted me last night crying because there were two men competing on there together as a same-sex couple. They were both, I think, ex-Marines or something. And those just aren't stories that you hear very often. And to know that a show on a major network produced by the biggest superstar in the game is on primetime television and that it's reaching every market, it was a big deal. So I have it DVR'd. I'm going to watch it later, but it brought my mom to tears. So, and she's just Northwest Ohio. So awesome. Pretty cool stuff.
We'll turn you into Giannis fan. We'll turn you into a Giannis fan before this is over.
Well, LeBron might only be around for a couple more years, but then Bronny's going to start playing. So I might be, I don't know. We'll see. Okay. Thank you so much. Isima, are you here?
I sure am. Hello.
JetBlue, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Good. You're a ray of sunshine. I adore you. What are your key LGBTQ plus goals for 2021 and beyond?
So we are really looking at our overall strategy and how we are going to be a more inclusive company for 2021 and beyond. Not because we just know it's the right thing to do and it makes good business sense, right? And so, I don't think anybody can have these conversations without talking about allyship. We're so proud that our first crew member resource group, which everybody else calls employee resource group, was our Pride group. And they really have set the stage and really led the way. And so leaning on that group for understanding. Allyship is really important. They have demonstrated and led from the front there, specifically yielding their platforms often to, during some of these troubling times, to some of our other CRGs so that their voice can be amplified, and then joining with them so that their voice could be amplified. We continue to invest in our crew members, and when you talk about how JetBlue shows up internally, we are making sure that we are acknowledging everybody and their uniqueness. And so whether it be through our benefits program, whether it be through how we do sponsorships, we are really trying to allow everybody to show up as their authentic self every day. We have degendered our uniform policy. That was huge for us, making sure that people can be their authentic self no matter where they work. If they work on a plane, if they work in the airport, if they work on the ramp, or if they work in the office, we want everybody to come to work as their authentic self. And so how do you continue to put that message forward and allow JetBlue to broaden its horizons? Because the aviation industry, I heard some comments about industry being a little bit narrow and maybe not being as open-minded. The aviation industry has a little ways to go as well. And so how do we become more welcoming? Some of our other initiatives is to continue to look at how we're hiring people and who are we hiring, and who has a seat at the table on all levels at the organization, right? And so we know that most organizations are very diverse, as you become more senior in those positions, there's the diversity disperses. And so how do we bring that diversity back? How do we honor and support our LGBTQ plus crew members who would like to move up in the organization? How do they show up? And how do we welcome them to different levels of the organization? We're starting a few programs that, one, will invite them into aviation in more traditional terms. So pilots and maintenance, and how do we become more inclusive there? And also, how do we allow crew members to show up and become more inclusive in the conversations corporately? So those are things that we're specifically working on at JetBlue, really looking to break down some traditional barriers that have maybe had people not show up authentically, and also have held people back. And so we're trying to break those barriers down. Bias is real. And if you can't say that, then you can't fix that. And so we're trying to identify some of the areas in which we know we have some shortcomings, and really make JetBlue a much more inclusive culture. And I've been at JetBlue since the beginning, and I can honestly say that we have always been inclusive. And so for us to say that we can do better, I honestly feel that we are probably light years ahead of some, but not as far as others.
I love that you're even willing to admit that. That's so beautiful. And we can all continue to learn and grow. I've been at Channel Q for just over a year now. I've been gay for 40 years, and I learn every single day something new about my community and about myself. So I think that's really a really powerful acknowledgement. Seema, thank you so much.
And if I could just, I'm sorry, if I could just add really quickly, one of the things I think that's helping us along our journey is that we're, not trying to do this independently. Our crew members are helping guide and lead the way. And so whether we are looking to take gender out of the booking flow, we're just really trying to be more inclusive, but we're listening to our crew members so that we get it right.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Now let's move on. We got a whole list of questions I'd like to get through. I'd like each of you to have a chance to at least respond to one of them. So we're going to start with Jarvis Sam of Nike once again. And I'm curious to know, how integrated is your DEI strategy across your organization at Nike?
Yeah, so it's an incredibly integrated strategy. I have the great honor to actually lead that work for us from a global perspective. And so we assess it on a variety of different dimensions. It starts with our global office. So, Nike obviously has an incredibly international business with significant growth continuously happening in the greater China marketplace, significant investments being made throughout much of the EMEA region. And as we look to, the term more emerging market space and think specifically about our connection in Asia Pacific, Latin America, there's just a huge opportunity for us to focus on that integrated office, particularly as we think about our engagement with LGBTQ plus populations. And so the way our strategy really builds out to align to that focuses on a lot of the areas actually that Raven identified. Education plays such a critical component in this work. Oftentimes, many companies immediately go to action, missing out on the opportunity to drive clear and apparent focuses on cultural awareness and cultural intelligence that are so heavily rooted in education, helping us learn more and more about experiences of marginalized communities so that we can tap into a strong focus on understanding and what that means for how we build forthright and effective approaches. Where we do a lot of work, though, is on empathic leadership. So how do we get our leaders to focus on vulnerability and authenticity as a means to drive transparency? Well, what this truly is helping leaders to highlight where they may have been complicit, largely through possession of their own privilege, in creating these spaces for opportunity where we can learn from and benefit from the experiences of marginalized populations. This form of empathy we find to be super successful in that it helps us to distinguish it from actions of sympathy, where we simply feel sorry for a certain community or allege that it's the right thing to do without drawing that connection to the actual integrated system that helps us to be more effective. And so our strategy focuses on a couple of key areas, namely representation, education, development, and community. And it helps us to create an ecosystem where when we think about the consumers and our consumer brand, we need to seek out and find congruence between that and our employment brand. So what is the employment value proposition that you want to position for folks that might be interested in joining your company, employees that already work within your company, as well as your consumer on the outside? And the kind of added benefit. That's why, I'm sitting back watching, listening to the LeBron versus Giannis debate. And I'm like, we win either way. They're both amazing Nike athletes that have been so deeply involved and connected with our Nike brand, our Jordan brand, and our Converse brand around key topics connected to social responsibility. And so when you think about that added capacity of our elite athletes, it creates a system, AJ, where we have to look to product, brand, and our people and team and talent strategy end to end to actually build an appropriate approach or connection. Where I see a lot of companies navigating this space is they'll sometimes invest dollars or on occasion human capital resourcing to support either LGBTQ plus driven efforts, HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, etc. But then that's not being matched by how they think about their connection from a product standpoint, a technology standpoint, or an engagement standpoint. And that's where I think the big underpin is for us. Is look to the ecosystem, see how you build that connectivity, and then go out into the marketplace with that focus on congruence and alignment.
Jarvis, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm still crying over Serena's loss last night, but then she lost to Naomi Osaka. So again, you guys are winning. So
absolutely.
and I think you mentioned it. I believe Asima mentioned as well. Yeah, I think it's so important to bring up that even like Asima said, their company's been doing this for so long and they're still learning. I've been gay for 40 years and I recently got engaged over the Christmas break, and my partner of 8.5 years happens to be Black. And I still have been caught in moments where I just make an assumption. And one example I don't even remember exactly what I said. I assumed something where maybe I was feeling sorry for him for something. And he looked at me and he goes, "Are you for real?" He's like, your dad's been married 4 times. You come from a broken family and you have college debt. He's like, my parents have been together for 40 some years and I don't have an ounce of debt to my name. I got a full ride scholarship and I graduated college at 21. You dropped out twice. And I was like, oh yeah, that's probably some
shade.
There's probably some privilege and an assumption that I made, even with my own partner, and to be open to hearing that and acknowledging that isn't always easy. Mostly because that's not the intention, right? Most oftentimes we might assume things or make statements without having the intention behind it. And it takes a little bit of humble pie sometimes to remind us that we still have a lot of learning to do, even if we are doing our very best. So I want to acknowledge both of you.
I'll quickly add, AJ, that intent versus impact debate, it's a strong one. And we have to recognize even what we intend to do as allies. We got to know that if you are heterosexual, you still have the benefits. You're a benefactor of heteronormativity. That doesn't make you homophobic or transphobic, but you are indeed a benefactor of it. And so impact has to precede and supersede elements of intent.
Yeah, I've learned that there's privilege in this, even though I'm gay as the day is long inside. But when I walk down the street, I have this as sort of a shield that protects me. And I'm still learning that and trying to find ways I can use it best, which is hopefully what I'm doing today. without centering myself too much in the conversation, so I should continue. I would like to know, Jeff, my boss, Jeff Fetterman from Entercom, how integrated is your DEI strategy across our organization and throughout the entire Entercom brands?
Yeah, well, I should ask you how you how you see it. Right? You're an employee. Like, do you feel it? Do you?
I love it. I love working for you. It's been an interesting year, but I feel so comfortable in our organization, and it's been interesting to see, the other stations in our cluster sort of get to know us, and they're always kind of curious to know what's going on with Channel Q. We're like the new cool kids. But I'd love to hear from your perspective.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting about that is actually on 2 of our morning shows here in LA, we have outside of Channel Q, we have openly gay members, lead members of each one of those shows, which is really, that's something that you would not have, not because it wouldn't have been allowed 10 years ago, or they just would not have been open. And now we have bits that focus on them being gay. On Mondays on one of our stations, we do, during football season, great gay moments from the weekend, and it's sound bites from the different NFL games, and it's funny, right? It's taking a subject that for a lot is, there's a lot of sensitivity around it, and really opening up discussions, and that's what's been exciting again to see. Internally, though, we partnered, and I'm really proud of Entercom for doing this. We partnered at the end of last year with Urban League. And we have an office that we each now have per our markets. We're in about 40 markets as a company. And we are partnered with one of those offices, and we're bringing in fellowships across the country. And that is to enable us to have more diversity and to make sure that we're calling out where there isn't diversity. And one area that we're really focused on is our news stations and news reporters, and making sure that the newsrooms are diverse. And we probably in past years haven't been doing a great job of that. Like, I've heard a lot of us on here admit that, we have a lot of shortcomings, and while we've come a long way, we have a long way to go. I think that's one area. And especially because when you're talking about people that are delivering news on a daily basis, you want to make sure that news is going through a lot of filters, right? It's not just one filter, but it's going through a lot of filters the way that everybody's experienced in their life. So we're really, really excited about that. And I'm proud of the company again for partnering with them. And then we do programs throughout the year on radio.com. We have a Justice Now program that is just terrific, that talks about, it leans more towards African-American, but the issues around African-Americans, it started with George Floyd. That's when we launched the show. It's on every other week, produced by the great Brian Holt, who's our program director also for Channel Q. But it touches on subjects. It's taboo what we're doing in the middle of a music radio station, an afternoon drive. Every other week, we stop down and we go commercial free, and we have an hour of just talking with guests about whatever might be going on in the world, whether it's during the summer, it was the BLM, marching, whatever it might be, the elections, obviously, as we got closer to November. But it again shows the commitment that we have, that, it's not all about money. It's about serving the community. And so I'm proud of those programs. We have several of those programs that we do and we've engaged with. And, hopefully we'll have more as we carry on. And being in the media, I will say, and I obviously was anticipating this call today, and I happened to be watching a program last night on one of the streaming channels with my kids. I have a 13-year-old and 11-year-old. And we were watching, I don't know if you guys ever saw the show Freaks and Geeks. And we just actually finally finished it. And at the end, I think it's 15 episodes, my kids said to me, "Dad, how did the language that they use get on the air when this show aired?" And it is really stunning, the derogatory terms that were being used, that, when I watched the show, probably when it was first airing back in the day, I probably didn't even think about it. But it did make me made me proud that they called it out, but also made me proud that we've come a long way. And again, as I think we discussed, we're not there yet. but we've come a long way in terms of, and I guess someone, tolerance isn't the word, but just common courtesy on how we address one another and how we talk about human beings. So had to get that plug in for media in general, because it just literally last night, it struck me as, wow, they picked up on that. And I think we are lucky, the younger generation, because of social media, and I've seen this because I also have older kids, they stuck to themselves, but my younger kids, because of social media, they are really understanding different cultures, and their friends are from all walks of life because they can connect that way, across state lines even. And that's, I think, is a really good step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's so true. And sometimes I watch old TV shows on like Netflix or Hulu, where I watch films from the 90s, and I'm like, wow, like, how was that okay? Like, watching things that I remember so fondly, I'm like, that's so problematic on so many different levels now. And it's interesting. I tell the story often, and it makes me proud, because my little nephews are probably like the whitest little boys you could ever imagine. They're like in 4th and 6th grade now. And a story a couple of years ago, they go to a school that's very diverse. Every type of kid from all around the world, every different configuration of parents and household. And my little nephew, I was over there for a barbecue years ago. He was maybe 6 or 7 at the time, and he was trying to describe one of the kids in his class, and never once did he use skin color to describe the child in his class. He used a gazillion other things to try to describe, oh, it's the little boy with the curly hair with the 2 dads, and everything that he used to describe the child, nothing had to do with skin color. And growing up where I grew up, the very first thing you would say, oh, it's the black kid, or the Mexican girl, or the white girl. And that was so normal as a child for me. But for this next generation, it's just so different, and it's beautiful. And we have a long way to go, but it's a step in the right direction. Thank you, Jeff, for sharing that. I'm interested in hearing about the representation within your C-suite or executive level. Let's go to Abby Fiorella with MasterCard. Take it away.
All right. Well, I am among the C-suite representation at MasterCard, and happily. But I will say it is so important, because coming up through the ranks, and I'll date myself here, I didn't see LGBTQ executives, or candidly even peers. And so I was closeted for a long time early on in my career. In fact, when I was an assistant DA way back in the day, and I decided that my way of sort of coming out was to sort of start the job by putting up a picture of my then partner, now wife of 32 years. But I put a picture of her on my desk. And it was shocking, because one person asked if it was my daughter, which was very upsetting to me. But the next actually said, who is that? And I said, it's my partner. And they looked at me, and because I was in the DA's office, and they thought, that's odd, I'm not in private practice. They said to me, but partner how? Like partner in crime? And my response was, in some states, thankfully not in New York. We've been together now for several years and hope to be married one day. But it was such, that was sort of a big, bold moment to break the ice. And I say that because, it made it easier when I was out there for other people to be out. And so when I joined MasterCard 18 years ago, and I joined sort of as a, sort of mid-level line manager, have worked my way up, and am now an executive vice president, and one of many, and who represent. But I was there for the founding of our first business resource group. I've watched sort of our community grow. We now have, 18 chapters in places, as far and wide as Singapore or Gurgaon, India. So it's been amazing to see grassroots. And when people see openness or see themselves reflected, it's empowering, it's motivating. That's why they come to work, because they can bring their whole selves to work. And representation is more about just seeing what I can identify with, but it's knowing that there's a seat at the table for everyone. And so for us, diversity and inclusion is, more than just about gender, identity, orientation, race, ethnicity. It's a diversity of experiences, of ideas, of backgrounds, of perspectives, where everybody gets to sort of stand up, be seen, and be heard. And that's what makes us better. That's what makes us accessible to one another. That's what makes us, receptive to what our constituents and our communities and our customers are looking for, and it eliminates blind spots and it spurs, innovation. So I think I can't sort of, overstate the importance of it. And so, look, for me, my personal journey, having been, closeted early on in my career, when I finally did come out, being so well received and supported, and I didn't get where I am in my career on my own. I had people that were willing to sort of reach out, extend a hand, and pull me up. And so I feel like I have an obligation and a responsibility to reach out, extend my hand, and pull other people up, and make sure that we are reflective of sort of the communities that we work and live within.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I'm glad you are where you are. And I'm glad that you had that experience and it brought you to this place where you can understand and empathize with others and bring others up with you. So thank you so much, Abby, for that. I'd like to head over to Connor again, Connor Feeney at Unilever. And I'm curious to know, what is your strategic direction in your hiring and training practices in regards to diversity? Also, do you have an active recruiting plan and inclusive hiring practices to attract top LGBTQ plus talent? And if so, could you elaborate on that for us?
Cool. So I think, AJ, the answer to that is yes. So the good thing is that now we've got a number of different BRGs that represent a broad diversity agenda in the US and also globally. And I can speak from my own personal experience as well. If I go back to when I started in Unilever 10 years ago, and I was not out, and to where I am now, and I'm happily married to my husband based in New York. And I see the change that's happened within the company. I've been lucky. I've traveled. I'm obviously a native of Ireland originally, but I've traveled to London, to Singapore, and now to New York. The level of change that I've seen in the company has been quite incredible. And you really see it today with the broad engagement, the broad network that we have in the business. And it's the most importantly reflected in that question that you just asked. It's how do we then represent? Do we have the policies in place? And we do, and we actively are out there recruiting on a broad D&I agenda. That is our focus. We want the US, everyone in the US and everyone in the world, so be it London, be it Jakarta, Singapore, or New York, to know that if you are queer, you are welcome in Unilever, without any exceptions or any difference of view or difference of direction, no matter where you are. I think that's a key priority for us moving forward for the business overall, and it is reflected in our hiring policies as well.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. I would like to move on to Isema Gibbs. Once again, how are the employees involved in your ERG, BRG, and how does your organization work with them for impact on their budgets? And also, is there a feedback loop between your C-suite and ERG? Can you talk to us a little bit about how you do things at JetBlue?
Sure. Okay, so budgets, we're an airline, we're in a pandemic, so we'll start there. But we are conscious of working with our CRGs in a lot of different ways. One is that we're trying to include them in our business solutions. And so when there is an opportunity to gather input or an opportunity for their voice to be heard, we make sure that that happens and that they know that their voice is valued and important. So during the summer unrest, we relied heavily on our Black CRG, which is JetBlue's African diaspora group, and titled Jade. And so we literally had town halls with them and spoke to them and really spent time with them to understand how we could be more impactful, but what their expectations were. It's easy to sit in an office and decide what should be done, and that might not be what people are looking for. And so the best intentions don't always play out to have the most impact. And so we wanted to make sure that we got our CRGs involved, whether it's that situation, whether it was the Pulse shooting and how we reached out to our Pride group and to make sure that they were satisfied with our response, how we openly supported that community during that horrible situation. So we really bring our CRGs as our subject matter experts into the fold and make sure that we honor and value their suggestions, opinions, and offerings. And then as far as the line to the C-suite, absolutely, they do have a great connection with the C-suite. Our culture at JetBlue is so unique and so wonderful. And I think one of the things that has helped us propel our CRGs and our DEI strategy is the willingness of our leadership to be part of that, to not think that they know everything, but to take the advice from these subject matter experts and the people who are on the ground doing the work. And so the CRGs have not only direct access through formalized meetings, but they also have access through training and leadership that we do for our CRGs and our CRG leaders to make sure that they can effectively run their organizations. And so we're having a summit in a few, next week actually, and leadership, our president will be there, have a frontline opportunity to engage with our CRG members, and we make sure that they have a direct connection with our senior leaders. We have a very open door policy at JetBlue, but we also have structured opportunities for them to not only engage in feedback, but offer their suggestions and be part of business solutions. So we can consistently work on that, but it is ingrained in how we do business.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Asima. I'd like to move on to Jen Palmer with T-Mobile. Is it important to your company to be held accountable internally by employees, ERG, and shareholders, the community, your peers? Are you open to that? Is it important?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the FCC. So we put it out there that we fully intend to evaluate how we show up internally with our own, hiring, recruiting, that pipeline. How do we do promotional, promotions and development? How do we, externally face communities? What are we doing to provide services for the communities? But really Abby talked about it a little bit. Asima did as well. It is imperative for our business. You guys are starting to hear all the 5G wars coming out, and you think about, well, what does 5G mean? Gosh, when 4G launched, things like Uber didn't exist. So this is a pivotal moment for us as we springboard into new technology. Man, we gotta have inclusive. And that inclusive design needs to be anything like making sure, hey, are we looking at binary genders when we're designing something? Is this accessible? Have we made sure that we're inclusive of broad swaths of different communities than what our designers are? So we need to bring in that pipeline and that talent and just a breadth of different individuals. And if that means that we need to start supporting scholarships, we're doing that right now with HBCUs. We're also doing some more from an internship perspective as well. And really just actively recruiting from a LGBTQ perspective, going after lots of MBA candidates as well. So we're really trying to tackle this at many different ways. And then, as I mentioned earlier, internally as well, how do we make sure that pipeline, when we're looking at leadership programs? Personally, I sat with our marketing organization leaders the other day, and we were taking a look at talent for our next folks that are in the director category, getting them up to the VP level. And, it was fantastic to finally see this breadth of talent represented. And all of our organizations are really taking a look at it. I will tell you, some of our teams are more advanced at this than others, and so we're all kind of coming at this from different perspectives. But we've hired external companies to come in and really take a look at, hey, so-and-so leader of this group, you really need to start, here's some of the flat sides. Here's what you need to start taking a look like. And here's what we recommend to, increase your talent pool and that breadth there. So it's a little bit of, we're still working on this, but we're absolutely dedicated and committed to doing so, because it's just going to make, the next level of technology that much more inclusive as we're just getting going on this whole 5G perspective.
Thank you so much, Jen, for sharing everything that you're doing. I would like to know, Sue McManus from Nationwide once again. I'm curious to know, in thinking of measuring impact for your company, what tools do you use to measure both your improvement and areas of need, such as internal scoreboards, HRC annual CEI survey? Can you talk on that for us and explain how you do that at Nationwide?
Yeah, I love that question, AJ. You know, we're an insurance and financial services company, so we love to measure things and use those insights and turn them into actionable improvements. And of course, we pay attention to our ranking on the HRC Corporate Equality Index. And as HRC has raised the bar over time, we pay attention to their thought leadership and how we apply it to nationwide. We also include we have an inclusion index as part of our culture survey that all associates fill out every year. And we've continued to raise the score on that among our associates. I think the most interesting example, though, in this area of measurement is around health and well-being. So as an employee benefit, we can have eligibility for medical insurance. And as part of the company-sponsored medical insurance, there's a health assessment. It's super easy. If you do it, it'll reduce your out-of-pocket costs. And it's just a survey that asks questions about, you know, eating habits, exercising, preventative care, smoking, et cetera. Well, a few years ago, we added a question on there to ask associates to self-identify as LGBTQ. And this did two big things for us. One, it allowed us for the first time to count the number of associates who self-identified as LGBTQ. Second, it allowed us to cut the data and look at the health and well-being and practices of our LGBTQ associates compared to the rest of the associate population. And so a few of the things I remember that came out of there, and these may or may not be surprising, but our LGBTQ associates tended to drink alcohol more than the general population, tended to say they were stressed out more than the general population, and were less likely to go to the doctor for preventative care. And so as a professional marketer, I love having these insights because that lets you know where to focus the message and create change. So we, as part of our Pride ARG programming, really focused in these areas and reinforced the benefits of healthy lifestyle and getting your free doctor visit for your annual checkup every year and how to manage stress. And it worked. And what we saw happen is over time, more associates started self-identifying as LGBTQ because I think they trusted that what we were doing with the data was well intended. And then the second, we actually saw those health numbers improve among our LGBTQ associates. And so that was a pretty cool new thing that we did and continue to do today.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Sue. I'd like to take this next question back to Raven Jemison from the NBA. I'm curious to know, beyond employee engagement ERGs, does your company sponsor Pride or Pride events? If so, why or why not? And also, do you actively promote Pride internally to your employees, not just members of the community, to your employees at large?
Yeah, great question. I also want to connect with Abby after this to understand the marriage of 32 years, what secrets you have. So would love to figure that out, because I'm definitely interested in making this last.
I'm going to say that I think we get an extra couple of years for being quarantined during a pandemic. So we'll definitely we'll talk after that. Yes. Perfect.
So yes, and again, I'm straddling the line of the NBA league office as well as the Milwaukee Bucks. But I'll go back to my time with the NBA. I just left there in January. During my tenure, we did sponsor Pride. And if you guys know about Pride in New York City, it's a pretty big deal, okay? We not only sponsored Pride, but we also had a float in the Pride Parade. So to be able to see our commissioner, Adam Silver, and see senior executives in the float or on the float and being active on the float and having employees, basically we had to shut off employees participating in Pride. It was personally gratifying for someone like myself because it spoke to the inclusivity of our organization, and not just inclusivity from the standpoint of it's in vogue to be inclusive, but a welcoming environment for me to say I can be authentically myself. I can feel proud of not only who I am, but who I work for. And I mean, I spend more time with my coworkers than I do my family, right? So knowing that I'm a part of an organization that looks at me as a human being and not as a number or metric or anything like that, it was definitely something that I feel like you can't buy that kind of thing. And when you talk about keeping employees happy and the things that are intangible, that don't cost money per se, these are the types of things that we try to do with respect to that partnership with Pride in New York City. And if you have not been to Pride in New York City, I highly, highly recommend making the trip post-pandemic. To your second question with respect to actively promoting Pride, I'll go to my time now with the Milwaukee Bucks 4 days in. We do promote it internally with our employees, and we promote it by hosting a Pride night. So if you guys don't know what a Pride night is at a sporting event, it's essentially a night to revere and to respect and to honor the community. And we have one of our largest corporate partners here in Milwaukee, Frederick Medical College of Wisconsin, is one of our significant partners with respect to revenue, but they're also one of our significant partners with respect to ideating around what this platform means for them. So they bring ideas to us, right? It's one thing to say, we want to host a Pride night. And I'll tell you, the genesis of Pride night typically in sporting events was, let's just go work with the LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce and offer them group tickets to a game, and we'll call that Pride night. We've expanded beyond that in Milwaukee, and we have definitely made sure that it is a night, again, where we revere the community, but we highlight and honor the work of those who are doing the work. And I talked about this a little bit before. We're not the experts. We want to make sure we give the respect to the folks that are doing it. And this night, again, when we talk about our reach, there's going to be people in the stands that have never met a gay person in their life, right? And there's going to be people watching TV and they see rainbow flags and they see people being honored that have never experienced, especially here in Milwaukee, who've never experienced what it means to work and live alongside those in the LGBT community. So we also see this as an opportunity to open the eyes and be more, make those more aware of those in the community that are doing the work, but also just expanding, right? When we think about exposure, it's something that we highly pride ourselves on with respect to our Pride Night. And I'll just touch a little bit on how, I don't know if you guys followed any of this when we were in the bubble. The NBA was in the bubble during the summer. As we completed our season, we had Black Lives Matter on the court. And that was a big, big, big thing. And, you know, our players said it was important. Our league said it was important. And we lost folks, right? We lost some people in that. And so when we say we want to promote Pride with our employees and with our constituents that value and align with our values, this is what we want to do. And if we lose people, we lose people, right? Because we have a stake in the ground that this is what's important to us. And we want to do business with those who want to do business with us because they align with who we are as a company. So that's just a little bit about what we're doing with Pride here. And I can't wait. Again, I've only been in Milwaukee for a week now, so I'm excited to see what Pride looks like here. But we're super excited to, again, start to crawl a little bit now that we have some things set in place.
Well, thank you. I love hearing all these, thought leaders in this conversation talk about doing what's right over necessarily what's popular or what's, it might cost you some money. I know NBA's ratings did take a hit during the NBA finals, and part of that, we were in a bubble. We're obviously in a pandemic, but also, you're taking a stand on very hot button issues, but it's the right thing to do. My partner and I went last year to the LA Football Club, one of the MLS teams out here. They had Pride Night, and it was a packed stadium. I've never seen so many rainbows in my life, and we were anxious to go. It's a sporting event. I love sports, but to go with your partner, an interracial couple, and hold hands and cheer for sporting events, wearing, rainbow shirts and rainbow straps on your arms and waving flags, I still had I was anxious about it, but it was the most fun I've probably ever had at a sporting event. And I've been to Ohio State football games in the shoe. So it's super important. And it really does have an impact, even on somebody like me who is very passable, and still, it still just was a moment that I'll never ever forget. Thank you.
I'll just touch quickly, AJ. I think the misconception with a lot of folks is that folks in the LGBT community are not sports fans. Like for some reason, there's some type of delineation between non-LGBT or straight folks and those of us in the community. So I think there's a lot for us to learn in the sports business industry about where the buying power can be if we just open our eyes and make sure we're tapping and targeting the right folks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'd like to talk once again with Abby from MasterCard. I want to know, does your company offer and support mentorship within management levels? Because I know for me, mentorship is one of the reasons I am where I am today. It's so important, and oftentimes those in sort of minority communities are often overlooked. What are you doing at MasterCard?
Yeah, so I think we do a lot, and I'm going to say, mentorship to me is table stakes. I think you need sponsorship. So I'll talk a little bit about both. And it doesn't, you have to start with your recruiting practices. So we do a lot at the junior level, on college campuses and the like, to get as sort of a broad a net as possible. Candidly, we start earlier than that. We've got Girls for Tech programs where we're in grade school and middle school, which is really looking to develop the talent of the future and let kids know what's available to them. So we look to bring in talent young. We have folks mid-level career. That's where you really have to tap. We don't fill jobs just for the role that's open. We fill for the opportunity that lies ahead, both for that employee and for us. And so you will be given a wide range of experiences and opportunities to grow and develop. And we have formal mentorship programs, and we have BRG and others sponsored. Our Women's Leadership Network runs a mentoring program. So we also have executive level training that we provide. And again, we look to develop people early into their career and bring them up through the ranks and give them a wide range of experiences. But I distinguish mentorship, as I said, I think that's table stakes. And I want to talk a little bit about sponsorship, because mentorship, you coach, you support, you work through things with your mentee. Sponsorship means that you're going to help open doors for that person. You're going to help guide their career. You're going to make those introductions. You're going to invite them to the table. You're going to have, your hand at their back. You're going to bring them along. And I think that's so important. So we talk about both things as being critical, not interchangeable, not one or the other, but we need both.
I think I love that distinction, and I appreciate that. I never actually heard it described that way, but it makes perfect sense. So thank you so much for sharing with us, Abby. I would like to go back to Connor at Unilever. I want to know what you're doing for the transgender and non-binary community, both internally with sensitivity training and non-gender bathrooms, and externally in organizations you provide funding to, because this historically has been a segment of our community that is often overlooked. I want to know what you're doing at Unilever to help that community in particular.
No, thank you for the question, AJ, and I'm happy you asked me this. So we actually partner with an organization called Destination Tomorrow. They are focused on the transgender community. They're based out of the Bronx, and they are actually informing our strategy overall that I spoke to at the very beginning. So they are, we have to listen to the community outside of our business to really make sure that we're trying to drive the right systemic change that I spoke about at the beginning. And that will help inform both our internal policy to make sure we've got the right policies in place for the transgender community, but also our external efforts too. We just ran a campaign over the weekend, actually, that featured Aya, who's a member of the transgender community, off the back of a Dove campaign. And she comes from actually a Baltimore community-based organization that's focused there too. So kind of focused on that advocacy piece by leveraging transgender voices and really shining a light on that, and also then driving the donations and the change with those organizations. So we over-index in that space, and it's a key area that we're focused on.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I also want to take this question over to Jarvis at Nike, because your company historically is just so inclusive and on the forefront of all sorts of equality movements. What are you doing within your community to support the transgender and non-binary community?
Yeah, so there's a ton of work happening in this space. For one is from an internal perspective, we're actively in the process of launching our own internal guidelines as we continue to navigate both virtual working and remote working. We know that those digital attributes and digital assets means we have to understand things like pronoun identification to avoid misnaming, misgendering, or dead naming in clear ways within the company. And so ensuring that our tech systems actually are speaking to each other in the right way so that we are providing an effective employee experience. Two, we want to amplify our endeavors connected to around how do we continue to recruit more trans and non-binary identified individuals. And so in partnership with key groups like Out in Tech, Trans Can Work, Trans Tech Social, and a variety of others, we're continuing to amplify that talent attraction and engagement component as well, so that whether it's in our retail stores, our manufacturing zones, distribution centers, or corporate, that we're able to provide opportunities for this talent to come in and be part of the experience. But beyond that, I spoke a little bit earlier about the importance of congruence. It's so important that we look to that internal team and talent approach as well as what the external brand components look like. And I'm sure many of us on the call are well aware of legislation that continues to pop up in a variety of different states, whether Idaho, Tennessee, Illinois, etc., continually attempting to ban trans athletes from competing within their identified sports category. And so Nike is doing some continuous work through our global public affairs and government affairs organization to attempt to advocate in the right way to ensure that we're not just focusing on featuring greats like Naomi Maldonado in some of our campaigns externally, but we're actually practicing that in a clear and apparent way to impact youth of tomorrow. As we often highlight, sport provides such a unique opportunity, and the pervasive nature of sport means we have to make it accessible for all. And this is looking at a variety of different dimensions of what that is. And I love the way Raven captured it. There are so many different approaches to stereotype threat that impact sport right now, but there should never be a defined or refined approach of who has access, who has opportunity, and who doesn't. And so we're using our voice in that regard as well to be a strong advocate for trans-identified individuals, both those that are active professional elite athletes, as well as those that are coming up the ranks in middle school and high school, to create an open opportunity for all to engage in sport.
I just love that you dropped Naomi Maldonado in that conversation. That's where she is everything. We just finished
Absolutely.
Legendary on HBO. Have you watched Legendary on HBO Max?
Truly.
Ballroom community is on fire, honey. Thank you so much for that. This last question, I'm going to go through the list once again and give you all a chance to briefly respond to this, if that's okay with you all. I want to know, outside of Pride events typically held in June, what you are doing to support the LGBTQ plus community year round, both nationally and globally. Some of you have sort of touched on this, but just briefly let us know what you have going on in the coming year. Let's start with you again, Jarvis, and we'll work our way backwards.
Yeah, I'll kick it off to where I started. There's a sharp focus on intersectionality. And so what that means is whether it's Black History Month, Women's History Month, Asia Pacific Islander Heritage Month, so on and so forth, we will typically have a moment in each of those cultural months where we talk about intersectional experiences of LGBTQ plus identified professionals. And so today, actually, in about 30 minutes, we'll actually be doing a co-sponsored event between our Pride Network and our Black Employee Network, unpacking some of the readings, learnings, and incredible academic postulates of James Baldwin. And so by continuing on that journey, we're focusing heavily on education, helping people to understand some of the similarities and cultural nuances of this experience. And what it enables us to do is to talk about Pride 365. We jokingly quipped last year, even though we're all navigating COVID-19, it still provided an opportunity for us to do Pride 366 in a leap year, where we could connect the various ideas and perspectives of understanding our community is in everything. Our community is indeed sport. Our community has the power and potential to change and, as we know well, elevate the future. And so by deploying that approach of Pride 365, we've really been able to create a platform and an opportunity where all communities, albeit other forms of identity, are seeing themselves throughout the space.
I love that. And that's such a valid point I bring up all the time in these sorts of conversations with family and friends, that our community is literally the only community on the entire planet that represents every single subculture, every single religion, every single sex, gender, non-binary, everything. We're the only one. Yeah. We're it, which I think has scared people for a long time. But now corporations are finally starting to understand the potential within our community and the beauty and diversity that makes us who we are. So thank you so much for sharing that. Let's head over to Isema. How about you? I want to know, outside of Pride events in June, what are you doing to support the community year round at JetBlue?
So I think there are some ways that we show up externally. We have a long-standing partnership with Stonewall. And so, the men's gay chorus. And so we do New York's, we do a lot of different things in the LGBTQ community to support from a sponsorship standpoint. I think one of the things that we've also done is let that be known. So we have a plane. We name all of our JetBlue planes, and we have a plane that's named Shantae Blue Stay. Let me make sure I say it right.
Shantae, you stay. That makes more sense. Yes.
So, and we did a whole, award-winning spot about spill the safe tea. And it was brilliant. And so it took a lot for, we had to go through a lot to get that to be to be something that was forward facing. But I think it really made our crew members stand up, really proud to say, look at us, we are, waving our flags and saying it very loud that JetBlue is very, very inclusive. So we, one of our terminals was featured in the episode of the L Word. So I think that we continue to try to show up in different ways externally, and then internally. I think we've all talked a little bit about intersectionality. And so how does, our Pride group, who, to your point, AJ, show up across a wide spectrum, how do they show up and support through other months? And so whether it's Black History Month or Women's History Month, how do we really embrace that intersectionality, whether it be through our speaker series, which is called Lift Every Voice, whether it be through some events, how do our crew members really embrace each other and allow support for and voices for the entire community, the entire DEI spectrum. The other thing that I think that we are working on is we are looking at, everybody has to wear a name badge if you're in the front of if you're in the operation. Can we put your pronouns on your name badge? So just doing things to show people that we see them, that we think they're important, externally and internally. Some things are really fun in our fun voice, and some things we take very, very seriously. But we are working to become a community where everyone feels like they belong, and where everyone feels appreciated, but most importantly, where everybody feels seen.
Well, I appreciate you, and I see you. Thank you for that. How about Sue McManus at Nationwide? What is Nationwide doing to support the community year round?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot. And many of the things the other companies mentioned, we've had a really purposeful effort on intersectionality, and we just all celebrated Black History Month in February. And so we offered backgrounds for your team's background that was a All Lives Matter motif. And it was amazing how many associates across our entire company downloaded that and has been using it the month of February. We continue to expand our Pride mentoring program. And then something else that's been really important to us and will continue to be so, and I don't think anyone else has mentioned it, is stepping up to support LGBTQ friendly legislation at state and federal levels. And that's, a key part of our corporate responsibility to not only create the safe environment at Nationwide, but also in the communities where we live and serve our customers.
Thank you so much for sharing, Sue. Jeff Fetterman, I dare to ask, I still get paid 365 days out of the year, so you're doing a part there. But what else you got going on for the community throughout the year? How is Entercom and radio.com supporting the community?
So obviously, the goal is to expand Channel Q, as I mentioned earlier on, but also weave the message of Channel Q into our other brands, our other stations that might not, where those listeners and those consumers might not always hear the messaging that needs to be heard. And so the goal is to continue to have people like AJ on the air, and when there's some messaging that needs to get out, AJ goes on all of the other stations and talks about whatever happens to be of importance at that time. So that would be really the goal moving next year. We're in 36 markets now. We'd love to get it up to 50 markets. And then again, obviously on the radio.com app. And then continue to work with our corporate partners, the Lexus of the world and the U.S. banks and the Absolute Vodkas, work with them to, again, just to get the word out, spread the message. And I think the legislation part is really important because that's the change, right? That's the change that we need. We can all talk and we can make sure our employees are headed in the right direction. But if there's not change, systematic change, then there's, it's going to be difficult. It will always continue to be uphill battles for all of us. So, and that's, I love about Channel Q is we tackle all of that. So.
Thank you. And I will say that what I do love about my job is that I've never once been called into a meeting or got a text message or an email about my opinions. We share our opinions. We share how the government does impact our daily lives, my co-host and I, and we're both proud members of the community, and we're allowed to freely speak on that. And we have not been censored yet. And if we were going to get censored at any time, it would have been this last year. So I think we're out of the woods, hopefully. But thank you for the freedom to share, Jeff. How about Abby Fiorella with MasterCard? How are you planning to support the community year round?
Yeah, so I want to come back to where we started, which was, sort of business has to lead. You can't wait for the government to set the standard. And so we have to create the world that we want to see through our employees, which are our greatest asset. So I come back to the focus on intersectionality, and we have a number of events throughout the year where we celebrate both internally and externally. We're focused on education, awareness, using our community to advance product insights. We run spots with priceless experiences that feature, members of our community. I mentioned our True Name card. So it's not a one and done for us. It's just sort of who we are and how we show up. That includes legislation. It includes, amicus briefs and our allyship. We can't just do it on our own. So we need our allies, and those are allies within the walls of our organization, but also more broadly. And so we have a host of partners. The days of sort of writing a check to buy a table at an event are over on both sides, as they should be, which is we're in it for the partnership. We're in it for the power of what we can do collectively, which is more than we can do on our own. So we have partnerships with Heritage of Pride, the Human Rights Campaign, Lambda Legal, Lesbians Who Tech, Open for Business. And so we develop and we nurture those, relationships over time. And then lastly, same, which is the sort of encouraging folks to self-identify using, pronouns, and then our unique hashtag, which is acceptance matters.
Because it does. So thank you. I appreciate that. Connor Feeney at Unilever, what are your plans to support the community year round this year?
So look, we're 100% focused on getting outside of the city bubble and driving true, authentic support for a number of key grassroots organizations through monetary support, but also then leveraging the power of our brands, advocating for what these organizations stand for. I think a number of people have mentioned it has to then involve a very measurable change, policy change, lobbying legislators in these areas of the states to make sure that there is a true measure and a true outcome. And that's really what we're focused on this year.
Thank you for that. Jen Palmer with T-Mobile. What is your focus for this upcoming year in regards to our community?
Gosh, a lot of what my peers mentioned. I mean, truly, I've got emails going back and forth about the Equality Act right now and what we're going to talk about as we're on this call.
Next week.
And just those deep partnerships. I agree. It's so much. Writing a check's great, but how do you amplify that and see results? So some of the other things we're doing are, for example, in our Pride sponsorships, working with our partners there in those cities of how do our dollars go further and how are we actually positively impacting the community? We're also taking a pulse check with our employees. We've had a close relationship with GLSEN. Our employees thought LGBTQ youth was a great focus, but we're really wanting to also do more for the trans community. So we're in the middle of building that kind of whole roadmap, if you will, in addition to a roadmap that we've got are internally. Some of us, I would suspect, have some older systems, billing systems, et cetera, and retail systems. And so we're really trying to go forward and making sure that we've got more inclusive design, as I mentioned earlier there as well. It's that the pronouns on the name tags are an amazing, great start, but we need to make sure that we've also got inclusivity for our own customers, that we're making sure that we're using right names, et cetera. So building that out is a key for us, and having that long-term strategy and roadmap for products and services in our own internal systems.
Thank you for that. The little things that might not seem like a huge deal to somebody at the top of the food chain and the corporation actually means so much. So thank you for that. Raven Jemison from the Milwaukee Bucks, formerly the NBA. Your first week there, it's a loaded question, but what are your plans for the next year as you settle in?
Sure. And I just want to go back to my time at the NBA. So many have said, don't rely on the government, and actually do what you can to take a stand. And it's something that when we talk about this question, I think about it personally. And when I was with the NBA and we chose not to go to Charlotte for the All-Star game because of the bathroom bill, right? So I take that thinking now to Milwaukee to understand what we can do to really make an impact here in the city as well as the state. So I think a couple have mentioned this, but we're trying to learn from our partners. Again, many of your peers that have been in this space for so long, we're trying to really understand how we can creatively build platforms that are authentic, that are supporting the community in a way that is authentic, and not just writing a check, and not just doing the foundational work that is community outreach and the like. And again, we're early in our journey, but our 5 largest corporate partners have said, let's take a step back and really see the work that we can do with respect to the LGBT community, and making sure they're connecting us to the players in the market, right? Because we have the folks that we deal with and that we work with and have worked with for quite some time, but what can we do to really put a stamp on what the Milwaukee Bucks stand for as it relates to this work? And then I'll just go back to my opening statement. This starts internally. We can do a ton of stuff externally, but if we are not focused, and if we are not thinking about what being allies to our community really means, it's moot. And if we are trying to live what our mission statement is, which is to be the most diverse and inclusive entertainment organization, sports and entertainment organization, it's moot if we're not really living it as an action statement. So I just want to say that, again, I might reach out to some of you guys just to pick your brain even more, because I'm passionate about the work that we can do to really elevate what some of the folks that are really doing the work are doing in Milwaukee and Wisconsin alike.
Thank you for sharing that. I love it. That's part of what this entire panel is about. We want you to all, connect with each other and find out ways you can help each organization, each corporation do better moving forward. Now, 2 of the women who helped this all come together, they're so special to us, near and dear to my heart. Sharon Franklin Brown, I want to come to you first. She's the president and board of directors of the Christopher Street West Association and LA Pride, near and dear to my heart here in Los Angeles, where I am. For some reason, I'm wearing a turtleneck today. It's 70 degrees outside, but I thought it would look cute for the rest of the country. But Sharon, I want to know if you have anything you'd like to ask any of our panelists.
Sure. First of all, let me say thank you. The conversation that we've had today has been amazing to hear each one of you had to say and what you're doing. Thank you for that. I'm going to lay the groundwork for this question, given that I worked for HBCU once and attended it for a while. I was also terminated from HBCU for being a trans woman. So my question is more, and this is actually to you, Jarvis, because it sounds like to me you're leading in a lot of areas, and others are too, but I'd really like to hear from you. What are some particular strategies or best practices that you may be doing or thinking about doing to apply equity to within the trans community, specifically the Black trans women experience, along with not just assuring that transition is okay in the organization, but ensuring the recruiting and the promotional aspects of that particular community?
Yeah, there's quite a bit. And thank you so much for the question. I think it all starts with the infrastructure. I think for a lot of companies, they create these environments where we focus on acceptance. And where we need to move from is acceptance to celebration to amplification. And that's really where we're focusing our attention, is we understand the real impact that we have as a brand, particularly connected to key social and racial topics. And particularly with this population, this community, Nike has continually on many occasions released both internal and external statements around our sharp focus and connection to the idea that, one, trans lives matter. 2, Black trans lives matter. And more specifically, how we show up, particularly in areas where we do big business, whether it's in our retail stores or retail spaces, and amplifying voices there, as well as with our employees. That's where the big difference is actually created. It's less along the lines of, are we providing or facilitating the opportunity for transition to happen effectively, providing teams the education on what effective pronoun usage looks like. For us, that is the bare minimum that you should already have written into your company's practice and policy. The real work and the real impact comes when you then say, how do I then take this moment of education, amplify the voices of this population, give a platform to this population, and then create clear opportunity for it. Building off the rhetoric for the externally facing uncomfortable conversations with a Black man, Nike is continuing to do some internal endeavors around how do we have these conversations that some may say breeds discomfort or uncomfortability with individuals that identify as non-binary and transgender, to help people get over this constraint of, what if I say the wrong thing? Or what if I do the wrong thing? We have to put ourselves in those uncomfortable positions. That way we can elevate and amplify the perspectives and understand where certain privileges exist for cis-identified individuals. How do you leverage that privilege to build power for the community? And it harkens back to a point previously highlighted around the importance of mentorship and sponsorship. It's how do we proactively take steps as a company to ensure that we're sponsoring these individuals in the right and appropriate way across both the recruitment lifecycle and employee experience.
Thank you. Yes. I'm gonna give you a hand.
Thank you, Sharon.
You know what you're talking about. I'm learning so much today. It's incredible.
Thank you.
Sharon, do you have any other questions for anybody else?
No, I just want to say I've really enjoyed all of this, and Jarvis really hit on that question on those crucial conversations. You know, we have representation at the table sometimes, or getting there, but when we get to the table, are we shaking that table, or are we just co-signing on what's already there?
Mm.
And so that's why I'm so amazed to hear this conversation and to have more like this, where we can talk about those intersectionality, and specifically that Black experience. Because when we elevate the most marginalized of us, everyone wins.
You've all been absolutely fantastic. Stacey, is there anything else you want to say to anybody before I let everybody get back to their busy lives in the real world, or heading to another Zoom meeting, perhaps?
No, again, thank you all. You've all been incredible. And we want to especially thank LA Pride for leading and including us in this conversation. Thank you so much, Sharon and Tracy at LA Pride, for doing this. We want to thank Channel Q and radio.com. You're amazing. And a big shout out to AJ Gibson for being our awesome moderator and doing this work for us today. He's been fantastic. Thank you, AJ, very much for helping and joining us and guiding through this important conversation. And I think this has been really impactful, and I'm excited to see if we can hold more panels together to continue to use corporate partnerships to create change for our community across the country. Thank you.
I appreciate your words. I want to continue to learn from you. I think you're all really incredible. So thank you for your time today, and stay safe.